The drum stopped the moment Elena walked into the hall, and that silence told her something was already wrong before a single word was spoken. She had ruled beside Damian Ashford for 3 years, standing through storms that would have broken most, and she knew the sound of a room holding its breath. Every alpha from every allied pack sat along the long stone table, their eyes flicking toward her, then quickly away, as if looking at her too long might burn them. Damian stood at the head of the hall in his ceremonial coat, his jaw tight, his hands folded behind his back the way he always held them when he was preparing to say something he knew would hurt someone. Elena moved to her place at his side, the place she had earned through blood and loyalty, and she felt the wrongness settle deeper into her chest with every step. The pack elders would not meet her gaze. Even Grace, her closest friend among the warriors, looked down at the floor instead of offering her usual small smile. Damian raised his hand, and the hall fell into a silence so complete that Elena could hear her own heartbeat. "Tonight," he said, "I make an announcement that will shape the future of this pack." Elena's stomach tightened. She had heard him give speeches like this before, speeches about war, about treaties, about sacrifice. She had stood beside him through all of them, and she told herself this would be no different. She was wrong. To secure peace with the Crimson Moon Pack, Damian continued, and to end a conflict that has cost too many lives on both sides, I would take Seraphina, daughter of Alpha Nathaniel Cross, as my second mate and co-Luna. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. For one terrible second, she thought she had misheard him. But the gasps rippling through the hall told her she had heard exactly right. Every eye in the room turned to her now, waiting to see how she would break. She did not break. Not there. Not in front of them. Damian turned to her, and for a moment, something like guilt flickered across his face. "Elena remains my true Luna," he said quickly, as if the words could undo what he had already done. "This is a political necessity. Nothing more. Nothing more." As if 3 years of standing beside him, healing his wounds, fighting his enemies, and building this pack with her bare hands could be reduced to a footnote beneath someone else's name. Elena kept her spine straight and her expression calm, because she had learned long ago that a queen who shows weakness in front of wolves becomes prey. But inside, something ancient and furious was waking up, something that had been sleeping since the day she first swore her loyalty to this man. Seraphina entered the hall moments later, escorted by 2 warriors from the Crimson Moon Pack. She was beautiful in the way that made people stop talking, with dark red hair and eyes the color of amber, and she walked like someone who already believed she had won. She stopped in front of Damian and inclined her head, but her eyes slid toward Elena with a look that was not quite triumph and not quite pity. It was something colder. Something calculating. "I look forward to serving this pack," Seraphina said, her voice smooth and practiced, "alongside my sister Luna." Sister Luna. The words were meant to sound gracious, but Elena had the challenge hidden beneath them. The council began to murmur again, some in approval, some in confusion, and a few in open dismay. Old Alpha Edmund Vale rose from his seat, his weathered face troubled. "Alpha Damian," he said carefully, "the bond between a Luna and her Alpha is sacred. To share it, even for peace, is a wound that may never heal." "I understand the risk," Damian replied, though his eyes did not leave Elena's face. "But the lives we save are worth more than my comfort, or hers." Elena wanted to laugh at the cruelty of that sentence, the way he spoke of her comfort as though this were a small thing, a minor inconvenience rather than a betrayal that struck at the very center of everything she had built her life around. She thought of the night she had first arrived at this park, an omega with no name and no protection, mocked by wolves who believed she would never rise above the lowest rank. She thought of the years spent training until her knuckles bled, until she could stand against warriors twice her size and not flinch. She thought of the night Damian had been ambushed by a rival pack and she had fought through 5 wolves to reach him, dragging him back to safety while her own shoulder was torn open. She thought of every sacrifice, every battle, every quiet moment when she had chosen him over her own safety. And now he stood in front of the entire council and called her sacrifice a comfort he was willing to set aside. Grace appeared at her side as the council began to disperse into smaller conversations, her voice low and urgent. "Elena, are you all right?" "I am fine," Elena said, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. "You don't have to pretend with me," Grace whispered. "This is wrong." Everyone in that hall knows it is wrong. Elena said nothing. She watched Damian across the room, speaking with Nathaniel Cross, the two alphas shaking hands as though they had just settled a simple trade agreement rather than reshape the entire structure of Elena's life. Serafina stood close to Damian's side, already assuming the position that had once belonged only to Elena, and the warriors around them began to bow toward her as well, uncertain but obedient. Elena felt the weight of every gaze in the room, some sympathetic, some hungry for her downfall. She had enemies within this pack, wolves who had never accepted an Omega-born Luna, and she could see the excitement building behind their careful expressions. They believed her reign was ending. They believed she would be pushed aside quietly, replaced by a queen with better bloodlines and better alliances. She would not give them that satisfaction. As the council meeting drew to a close, Damian approached her, his expression softer now that they were no longer surrounded by watching eyes. "Elena," he said quietly, "I know this is difficult. I need you to understand that nothing between us has changed." "Everything between us has changed," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "You changed it the moment you decided to announce this to the entire pack before you ever spoke to me." Damian's jaw tightened. There was no time. The alliance needed to be secured immediately, or the Crimson Moon Pack would have allied with our enemies instead. "And so you decided for both of us," Elena said, without a single word of warning. He reached for her hand, but she stepped back before he could take it. The gesture was small, but the meaning behind it was enormous, and she saw the understanding flicker across his face, followed quickly by frustration. "I am still your alpha," he said, a warning edge creeping into his voice. "You are," Elena agreed. "But an alpha who cannot trust is Luna enough to warn her of a decision this large is an alpha who has already lost something far more valuable than an alliance." She turned and walked away before he could respond, her steps measured and calm even as her heart pounded against her ribs. Behind her, she could feel Serafina's eyes following her exit, and she knew without turning around that the other woman was smiling. Elena walked through the corridors of the pack house, past warriors who quickly averted their gaze, past servants who whispered behind raised hands the moment she passed. She held her composure until she reached her private chamber, and only then, with the door closed and the world shut out, did she allow herself to breathe. She sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the wall, replaying the announcement over and over in her mind. 3 years. 3 years of loyalty, of sacrifice, of building something she had believed was permanent, and it had taken Damian less than a minute to unravel it in front of an audience. A soft knock came at her door. She did not answer, and after a moment, she heard footsteps retreating down the hall. Elena rose and walked to the window, looking out over the park grounds bathed in the last orange light of evening. Somewhere out there, warriors were training, children were playing near the training grounds, and life continued as though nothing had shifted. But something had shifted, deep and irreversible, and Elena could feel it settling into her bones like a decision already made, even though she had not yet allowed herself to name it. She thought of the years before she came to this park, the years when she had nothing and no one, when survival meant depending only on herself. She had given that independence away willingly when she chose Damian, when she chose this park, when she chose to believe that loyalty would be returned in equal measure. Standing there at the window, watching the sun disappear behind the mountains, Elena made a promise to herself. Whatever came next, she would not be the wolf who waited quietly to be replaced. She would not beg for a place beside a man who had already decided she was expendable. She did not yet know exactly what she would do. But she knew, with a certainty that settled cold and clear in her chest, that by the time the sun rose again, everything about her life would be different. Behind her, the door creaked open. Grace stepped inside without waiting for permission, her expression fierce with worry. "Talk to me," Grace said. "Please." Elena turned from the window, and for the first time since the announcement, something like resolve crossed her face. "I need you to listen carefully," she said. "Because I am only going to say this once, and after tonight, I need you to forget you ever heard it." Grace's eyes widened, but she nodded, stepping closer. Outside, the last light faded from the sky, and the pack house settled into darkness, unaware that within its walls, a queen was quietly preparing to disappear. Grace closed the door behind her and crossed the room quickly, her voice dropping to a whisper even though no one else could hear them. What do you mean? Forget I heard it, she asked. Elena, you're scaring me. Elena sat down at the small wooden table near the window and gestured for Grace to join her. For a long moment, she said nothing, gathering the words in her mind, testing them before she let them out into the world where they could not be taken back. Tonight, Elena finally said, Damian did not just wound my pride. He revealed something about himself that I should have seen years ago. What do you mean? I mean that a leader who can make a decision this large, this permanent, without a single conversation beforehand, is a leader who has already decided my voice does not matter. Elena's hands rested flat on the table, steady despite the storm inside her. And once I accepted that truth, I could not unaccept it. Grace shook her head slowly. He said you would remain his true Luna. Maybe this really is only politics. Do you believe that? Elena asked, meeting her friend's eyes directly. Do you truly believe that any woman who walks into this pack as co-Luna, backed by an entire allied pack and a father who commands warriors of his own, will ever be content to remain second in anything? Grace hesitated, and that hesitation was answer enough. Serafina did not come here to share a throne, Elena continued. She came here to claim one. And Damian, blind to it or not, has given her exactly the opening she needs. Then what will you do? Grace asked. Elena stood and walked to the window again, looking out over the training grounds where torches now burned against the darkness. For 3 years, I have given everything to this pack. I fought when others fled. I healed when others could not bear the sight of blood. I stood at Damian's side through every crisis, every threat, every sleepless night when what seemed inevitable. I never asked for gratitude. I only asked for trust. And he broke that trust, Grace said quietly. He shattered it, Elena replied. And worse, he did it in front of the very council I have spent years earning the respect of. He made me small in front of the wolves who once called me nothing more than an omega with delusions of a crown. Grace's hands curled into fist on the table. Then we fight this. We go to Edmund Vale, to the other elders who respect you. We make Damian see reason. Elena turned back to her friend, and something in her expression made Grace fall silent. There is no reasoning with a decision already made public before an entire council, Elena said. To fight this openly would only divide the pack further, and any division right now would be seen by our enemies as weakness. I will not be the reason this pack falls into chaos, even if that pack no longer values me the way it once did. Then you will simply accept it. Grace asked, disbelief coloring her voice. Elena allowed herself a small, humorless smile. No. I will not accept it. But I will not fight it the way you expect either. A heavy knock sounded at the door before Grace could respond. Elena straightened immediately, smoothing the emotion from her face with practiced ease, and nodded for Grace to open it. Damian stood in the doorway, still dressed in his ceremonial coat, though he had removed the heavy chain of office from around his neck. His eyes moved from Grace to Elena, and something like relief crossed his features when he saw that Elena had not fallen apart in his absence. I need to speak with Elena alone, he said to Grace. Grace glanced at Elena, waiting for her signal. Elena nodded once, and Grace stepped past Damian into the hall, though not before shooting him a look sharp enough to cut steel. The door closed, and silence stretched between them. You should not have found out that way, Damian said finally. I know that. Then why did I? Elena asked, her voice calm, controlled, dangerous in its steadiness. Why did the entire council learn of this decision before I did? Damian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Elena had once found endearing and now found unbearably frustrating. Nathaniel Cross demanded the announcement be made publicly, immediately, as a show of commitment. There was no time to prepare you privately. There was time, Elena said. You simply chose not to make it. He did not deny it, and his silence confirmed what she already knew. Do you understand what you did tonight? Elena continued, rising from her chair to stand level with him. You did not simply agree to a political alliance. You told every wolf in that hall that my place beside you is negotiable. That 3 years of loyalty can be reassigned like a title, handed to whoever brings the most useful alliance. That is not what I meant, Damian said, his voice rising slightly with frustration of his own. I meant that peace matters more than either of our feelings in this moment. Lives are at stake, Elena. Real lives, warriors who would die in a war we could prevent. And my life. Elena asked quietly. Does that matter at all in this calculation? Damian's expression faltered, and for a moment, Elena saw something close to genuine pain cross his face. But pain was not the same as understanding, and understanding was what she needed from him now. Of course your life matters, he said. You are the reason I have survived every threat these past 3 years. You are the reason this pack still stands strong. I would never have made this decision if there had been any other way to secure this peace. Then find another way, Elena said simply. There is no other way, Damian replied, frustration returning to his voice. Nathaniel Cross made his terms clear. Either I take Seraphina as Coluna, or the Crimson Moon Pack allies with the Shadowfang territories against us. You know what that would mean. War on 2 fronts, a war we cannot win. Elena studied him carefully, searching his face for any sign that he understood the true cost of what he was asking of her. She found determination there, and something like desperation, but she did not find the understanding she needed. You are asking me to share a bond that was never meant to be shared, she said. You are asking me to watch another woman stand where I have stood, sleep where I have slept, and hold a place beside you that I built with my own hands and my own effort. And you are asking me to do this quietly, gracefully, for the good of a pack that has never once asked what I need in return. I am asking you to help me save lives, Damian said. I am asking you to trust that what we have built together is strong enough to survive this. Elena almost laughed at the irony of his words. He spoke of trust while he stood in front of her, having already broken it beyond recognition. Do you love her? Elena asked suddenly, the question surprising even herself. Damian blinked, caught off guard. What? Seraphina, Elena said. Do you feel anything for her at all, beyond the alliance she represents? No, Damian said firmly. This was never about feelings. You are the only woman I have ever loved, Elena. This marriage is a political necessity, nothing more. Then you are asking me to watch you build an entire future with a woman you feel nothing for, Elena said, simply because the demands of politics require it. Do you understand how impossible that is for me? Damian stepped closer, reaching for her hands. This time, she did not pull away, though she felt nothing warm in the contact, only the cold weight of a decision that could not be undone. I need you beside me through this, he said quietly. I cannot do this without you. Elena looked down at their joined hands, memorizing the shape of his fingers, the calluses earned through years of leadership, the warmth that had once made her feel safe. She thought of every night she had trusted this man with her life, every difficulty she had suffered defending a throne he now asked her to share without complaint. You have already done this without me, she said softly. The moment you stood in that hall and made your announcement, you decided this part without my voice in the room. Whatever happens next, remember that you chose this alone. She withdrew her hands gently, and Damian let her go, though confusion flickered across his features at the strange finality in her tone. Elena, he said, I need to know that you will stand beside me tomorrow, when Seraphina moves into the pack house permanently. I need to know that we can face this together. Elena looked at him for a long moment, memorizing his face, the shape of his jaw, the worry lines that had deepened over 3 years of leadership. She thought of how easily he now asked her to accept a wound far deeper than any battle scar. I hear you, she said finally, her voice giving nothing away. Go and prepare for tomorrow, Damian. I need time alone tonight. Relief crossed his face, mistaking her calm for acceptance. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, a gesture that once would have steadied her entire world, and now felt like the closing of a door. Thank you, he said. I promise you, Elena, this pack will remember your strength through all of this. History will remember you as the Luna who chose peace over pride. Elena said nothing as he turned and left the room, the door clicking shut behind him. She stood alone in the quiet chamber, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy cloak. Peace over pride. As though her pride was the only thing at stake. As though her entire identity, Her place in this world, the future she had imagined for herself, could be reduced to something as simple and dismissible as pride. She walked to her desk and sat down, pulling out a blank sheet of parchment. For a long moment, she simply stared at it, her mind racing through the years of her life in this park, every quiet alliance she had built, every warning sign she had noticed and filed away for a day she had hoped would never come. That day had arrived. She began to write, her hands steady despite the storm raging beneath her calm exterior. She wrote names, dates, locations. She wrote of warriors she trusted completely and elders whose loyalty had never wavered. She wrote of resources hidden away over years of careful preparation, resources she had gathered not out of distrust of Damian specifically, but out of the simple wisdom that any Luna who rises from nothing must always have a path forward that depends on no one else. Grace knocked softly and entered without waiting for a response, closing the door behind her. She watched Elena writing, her expression unreadable. "You're leaving?" Grace said. It was not a question. Elena did not look up from her writing. "I am reclaiming something that was taken from me the moment Damian decided my voice did not matter enough to include in his decision." "Where will you go?" Elena finally set down her pen and looked at her friend, her expression calm in a way that made Grace's chest tighten with unease. "There is a truth about my past that I have kept hidden even from you," Elena said quietly. "A truth I only recently began to understand myself. Tonight, I intend to follow that truth wherever it leads." Grace's eyes widened. "What truth?" "One I am not yet ready to speak aloud," Elena said. "But I promise you this, Grace. Whatever happens tonight, whatever the pack believes tomorrow morning, know that I did not run away in weakness. I am walking towards something far greater than the throne I am leaving behind." Grace crossed the room and embraced her fiercely. "Whatever you need from me, you have it. Always." "I need your silence," Elena said. "Until sunrise, and then, I need you to let them search for me and find nothing." Grace pulled back, studying her friend's face for a long moment before nodding slowly. "You have my silence." Outside, the moon rose high over the park grounds, casting silver light across the training fields and the quiet corridors of the park house. Somewhere in the distance, wolves called out their nightly songs, unaware that within the walls of their own home, their Luna was preparing to vanish into the darkness, carrying secrets that would soon shake the foundations of everything they believed about her, about Damian, and about the throne itself. Elena finished her letter, sealed it, and placed it inside a hidden drawer beneath her desk, not for Damian to find easily, but for the day when the truth would need proof to be believed. Then she rose, changed into simple traveling clothes, and began gathering only what she would need for a journey she had quietly prepared for over many months, long before tonight's announcement had ever been made. She paused once more at the window, looking out over the park she had loved and served for 3 years. Somewhere in this park house, Damian slept peacefully, believing he had secured her acceptance. Somewhere else, Serafina rested in her temporary quarters, already dreaming of the throne she believed would soon be fully hers. Elena allowed herself one final moment of grief for the life she was leaving behind, and then she closed the window, extinguished the last candle in her chamber, and stepped into the darkness of the corridor, moving silently toward a future none of them could yet imagine. The first scream came just after sunrise, sharp and panicked, cutting through the quiet morning air of the park house like a blade. Damian woke instantly, every instinct honed by years of leadership snapping into alertness before his eyes had even fully opened. He rolled out of bed, already reaching for the sword that hung near his door, when a second voice joined the first, and then a third, all calling the same name. Elena. He was in the corridor within seconds, still barefoot, his shirt half buttoned, following the sound of frightened voices toward Elena's chamber. Warriors were already gathered outside her door, their faces pale, their movements tense with the particular panic that comes from discovering something has gone terribly wrong. "What happened?" Damian demanded, pushing through them into the room. The chamber was empty. The bed was made, untouched since the previous evening. The wardrobe stood open, several garments missing, though most of her belongings remained exactly where they always sat. On the pillow, catching the early morning light, lay Elena's lunar pendant, the silver chain cord neatly beside it as though placed there with deliberate care. Damian crossed the room in 3 strides and picked up the pendant, turning it over in his hands. This was the pendant he had given her the night she accepted her place as Luna, the pendant that marked her as his equal in the eyes of the pack. She had worn it every single day for 3 years. She had never once removed it, not during battle, not during illness, not during the darkest nights of war. She had left it behind on purpose. "Search the grounds," Damian ordered, his voice sharper than he intended. "Search the training fields, the forest border, the eastern watchtowers. Someone find her scent trail immediately." Warriors scattered in every direction, shouting orders to one another, rousing others from sleep to join the search. Within minutes, the entire pack house had erupted into controlled chaos, wolves running through corridors, trackers gathering at the main gate, elders emerging from their chambers with confusion and alarm written across their faces. Grace arrived at Elena's door moments later, her expression carefully arranged into worry that did not quite reach her eyes. Damian noticed the difference but was too consumed by rising panic to question it. "Have you seen her?" he demanded. "Did she say anything to you last night?" "She seemed troubled," Grace said carefully, choosing each word with precision. "But she gave no indication she intended to leave." Damian ran his hands through his hair, his mind racing through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Had she been taken? Had an enemy pack infiltrated their grounds during the night and abducted her as retaliation for the alliance? Or had she truly walked away on her own, choosing to disappear rather than share the throne she had fought so hard to earn? He thought of their conversation the previous night, the calm in her voice that he had mistaken for acceptance. He thought of the strange finality in her final words to him. He had been so relieved by what he believed was her surrender that he had missed the signs entirely. "Bring me the trackers," he said. "Now." The pack's finest trackers arrived within minutes, kneeling at the edge of Elena's chamber, searching for any trace of scent that might lead them toward her. But something was immediately wrong. The trail that should have led clearly from her window or door simply vanished a few feet beyond the threshold, as though she had never stepped outside at all. "This is impossible," one tracker muttered, circling the room again. "No scent trail simply disappears. Unless what?" Damian demanded. The tracker looked up at him, uncertainty clouding his features. "Unless someone deliberately masked it. There are herbs, rare ones, that can erase a scent trail entirely if used correctly. But such knowledge is not common. It would require significant preparation." Damian felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Preparation meant intention. Intention meant this had not been a sudden decision made in the heat of anger. This had been planned, carefully and deliberately, perhaps for longer than he wanted to consider. He thought back over the past several months, searching his memory for any sign he might have missed. Elena had seemed occupied lately, often absent from the pack house for hours at a time, always with a reasonable explanation ready when he asked. She had spent increasing time in the Eastern archives, claiming interest in ancient pack histories. She had made several trips to neighboring territories under the guise of diplomatic goodwill visits. Had all of it been preparation for this moment? Serafina appeared in the doorway, her arrival delayed from the confusion outside, her expression unreadable as she took in the empty chamber and the gathering crowd of anxious warriors. "What has happened?" she asked, though something in her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. "Elena is gone," Damian said, unable to keep the strain from his voice. "She vanished sometime during the night, and her trail has been deliberately erased." Something flickered across Serafina's face, too quick for Damian to fully read, but Grace, standing nearby, caught it clearly. It was not surprise. It was something closer to recognition. "I am sorry," Serafina said carefully. "This must be difficult for you." Damian barely registered her words, his mind already moving toward the archives Elena had spent so much time in recently. If she had been planning something for months, there might be evidence left behind, some clue to explain where she had gone and why. "Grace," he said, "come with me." They moved quickly through the pack house corridors, past warriors still searching every room and passage, toward the eastern wing where the ancient archives were kept. The chamber was quiet and dim, lit only by narrow windows near the ceiling, shelves upon shelves of old text and records stretching back generations before Damian's own leadership began. "What was she looking for in here?" Damian asked, scanning the shelves with growing frustration. Grace hesitated, and Damian caught the hesitation immediately. "You know something," he said. "Tell me." "I only know pieces," Grace admitted. Elena rarely spoke of it directly, even to me. But she became fascinated, months ago, with the old records concerning bloodlines predating the current pack structure. She spoke once of a hidden lineage, wolves whose claim to leadership was older than the Ashford line itself. Damian's blood ran cold. "What lineage?" Grace moved to a shelf near the back of the chamber and pulled down a heavy, dust-covered book, its leather binding cracked with age. She set it on the reading table and opened it carefully, flipping through brittle pages until she found a section marked with a faded ribbon, clearly placed there deliberately, likely by Elena herself. The page described an ancient royal bloodline, wolves born with a rare and powerful gift, capable of commanding loyalty not through inherited title but through an inborn connection to the land and the moon itself. The bloodline had supposedly been erased generations ago, its last known descendants scattered or hidden, their claim to leadership buried by rival alphas who feared their power. "This cannot be real," Damian said, though even as he spoke the words, doubt crept into his voice. "Elena believed it was," Grace said quietly. "She told me once, only once, that she had memories from childhood that never quite made sense. Dreams of a different life, different faces, a different name. She always dismissed them as imagination. But recently, something changed. She began to believe those memories were real." Damian stared down at the ancient text, his mind racing to reconcile everything he thought he knew about the woman he loved with this new and impossible possibility. Elena, the Omega who had risen from nothing, who had fought her way into a position of respect through sheer determination and skill, might in truth be something far greater than anyone in this pack had ever imagined. "Why did she never tell me this?" Damian asked, more to himself than to Grace. "Perhaps because she was not certain herself," Grace said. "Or perhaps because she feared how such knowledge would change the way this pack, and you, would see her." Damian closed the book slowly, his thoughts a tangled storm of confusion, guilt, and something else he could not quite name. If Elena truly believed herself heir to an ancient and powerful bloodline, then her disappearance was not simply an act of heartbreak or anger. It was the beginning of something far larger, a claim to power that could reshape the entire structure of wolf society across every territory. "There is something else," Grace said hesitantly. "Something I probably should have told you before now." Damian turned to her sharply. "What?" "Elena had been gathering information," Grace said. "Not just about her bloodline, but about corruption within our own council. She discovered, months ago, that certain elders had been secretly accepting resources from rival packs in exchange for influencing pack decisions in their favor." Damian felt a fresh wave of shock roll through him. "Which elders?" "She never told me names directly," Grace admitted. "She said the information was too dangerous to share carelessly, that if it fell into the wrong hands before she was ready, it could cause chaos rather than justice. She was building a case, slowly and carefully, to expose the corruption when the time was right. And she never told me any of this," Damian said, the words landing heavier than he expected. "Would you have believed her?" Grace asked quietly. "Without proof, would you have questioned the loyalty of elders who have served this pack for decades, based only on the word of a Luna some of them never fully accepted?" Damian did not have an answer, and the silence between them stretched long and uncomfortable. Outside, shouts echoed through the park grounds as searchers returned from the forest border, their expressions grim and empty-handed. No trace of Elena had been found beyond the park house walls, no scent, no witness, no sign of struggle or capture. She had simply vanished, as though the earth itself had opened and swallowed every trace of her passing. Nathaniel Cross arrived at the archive chamber sometime later, his expression carefully neutral, though his eyes moved quickly over the ancient book still resting on the table. "I heard news of your Luna's disappearance," he said. "A troubling development, especially given the timing." "What do you mean by the timing?" Damian asked, suspicion sharpening his tone. "Only that it seems curious," Nathaniel replied smoothly, "that she would vanish the very night after your announcement, rather than confronting the matter directly. Unless, of course, she had reasons of her own to disappear that had little to do with the announcement at all." Damian studied the older Alpha carefully, searching for any hint of deception in his measured words. What do you know of this, Nathaniel? I know only rumors, Nathaniel said, whispers among traveling wolves of a hidden bloodline seeking to reclaim what was taken generations ago. Whether your Luna is connected to such rumors, I could not say with certainty. But if she is, Alpha Damian, you should understand that her return, should it come, may not be as a Luna seeking forgiveness, but as something far more complicated. Damian felt the weight of the older Alpha's words settle over him like a shadow. He thought of Elena's calm, deliberate departure, the careful erasure of her scent trail, the hidden research into ancient bloodlines and pack corruption. None of it painted the picture of a heartbroken woman fleeing in grief. It painted the picture of a queen preparing, patiently and methodically, for a battle far greater than the one he had assumed he was fighting. As the day wore on and the search parties returned again and again with nothing to show for their efforts, Damian found himself standing alone at the pack house gates, staring out toward the distant mountains where Elena had disappeared into legend rather than simple absence. Serafina approached quietly, standing beside him though not too close, her expression thoughtful rather than triumphant. You look troubled, she observed. My Luna has vanished, and I am only now discovering how little I truly understood about her life, Damian said. Forgive me if triumph is not the emotion you expect to find. Serafina was quiet for a long moment before speaking again. Elena contacted me privately, several weeks before your announcement was ever made public. Damian turned to her sharply. What? She reached out through a trusted intermediary, Serafina continued. She warned me, carefully and without malice, that certain members of your council could not be trusted, and that I should be cautious before committing myself fully to this alliance. Why would she do that? Damian asked, bewildered. You are meant to be her rival. Perhaps, Serafina said, she saw something in me worth warning, rather than something worth destroying. Or perhaps she understood something about the true dangers facing this pack that neither of us yet fully grasps. Damian stared out at the horizon, the pieces of a much larger puzzle beginning to assemble themselves in his mind, pieces that suggested Elena's disappearance was never simply about a broken heart or wounded pride. It was about a truth far older and far more dangerous than any alliance, any war, any throne he had believed himself the sole master of. Somewhere beyond those distant mountains, Elena was moving toward a destiny that had been waiting for her long before she ever became his Luna, and Damian was only now beginning to understand how little control he had ever truly held over the woman he had built his entire kingdom beside. 3 days passed before Damian allowed himself to sleep more than an hour at a time, and even then, his rest was shallow, filled with images of Elena walking away from him into darkness he could not follow. The search parties had expanded their range far beyond the pack borders, reaching into neutral territories and even sending careful inquiries to allied packs, though Damian insisted on discretion. If word spread that his Luna had vanished without explanation, rival packs might see it as an opportunity to strike, believing the Ashford pack weakened by internal chaos. Grace remained his closest source of information, though Damian had begun to suspect she knew far more than she revealed. He did not press her further, some part of him recognizing that Elena's secrets, wherever they led, deserved to unfold at their own pace rather than be dragged forward by force. On the 4th morning, a warrior named Lucas returned from a routine patrol along the northern border with news that changed everything. I found this, Lucas said, presenting a small folded parchment to Damian in the privacy of his study. Caught on a thorn bush near the old stone bridge, perhaps 2 days old by the weather wear on it. Damian took the parchment carefully, recognizing Elena's handwriting immediately, though the message itself was brief and cryptic. The truth waits where the old records were buried, not preserved. Seek the ruins beyond the hollow veil, and you will understand why silence was necessary. Damian read the words 3 times before looking up at Lucas. Where is Hollow Vale? A ruined settlement, several days' journey north, Lucas answered. Abandoned generations ago, if the old maps are accurate. Some say it was once the seat of power for a bloodline erased from pack history, though most dismiss such stories as folklore. Damian's mind returned immediately to the ancient book Grace had shown him in the archives, the description of a hidden royal lineage supposedly wiped from history by rival alphas who feared their power. If Hollow Vale truly was connected to that lost bloodline, then Elena's message suggested she wanted him to understand something specific, something that could not simply be explained through words alone. He gathered a small, trusted group for the journey north, including Grace and Lucas, deliberately keeping the party small to avoid drawing attention from either allies or enemies who might wonder at his sudden departure. Serafina, upon learning of his plans, insisted on joining as well, a request Damian initially resisted before ultimately allowing, recognizing that her presence might prove useful given her earlier admission of contact with Elena. The journey north took 3 full days, traveling through dense forest and rocky terrain that tested even the most experienced warriors among them. Damian used the long hours of travel to press Serafina further about her earlier conversation with Elena. "Tell me exactly what she said to you," he asked one evening as they made camp beside a narrow stream. "Every word you can remember." Serafina considered the request carefully before answering. "She said that the council held secrets capable of destroying the very alliance you were trying to build. She said that certain elders had accepted resources from the Shadowform territories in exchange for weakening our pack's defenses at a critical moment. She believed the marriage alliance itself was being manipulated by these same corrupt elders, pushing you toward a decision that served their own hidden agenda rather than the pack's true interests." Damian absorbed this information slowly, his mind working through the implications. "Are you saying the entire alliance was manufactured by corruption within my own council?" "I am saying that Elena believed so," Serafina replied. "And given what little I have learned since arriving at your pack, I am inclined to believe she was right." "What have you learned?" Damian asked sharply. "Whispers among your warriors," Serafina said. "Suggestions that certain resources meant for border defense have been quietly redirected elsewhere over recent months. Nothing confirmed, only rumors, but enough to raise concern in anyone paying close attention." Damian felt a familiar frustration building within him, the same helpless anger he had felt upon discovering Elena's hidden research into pack corruption through Grace. How had he remained so blind to threats developing within his own walls, while focusing entirely on external alliances and external wars? "Why would Elena tell you this, rather than confronting me directly?" Damian asked, the question weighing heavily on him. Serafina was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Perhaps because she understood that you would not have believed her without proof, especially proof that implicated elders who have served you loyally for years. Or perhaps because she recognized, correctly, that revealing such information directly to you would have placed her in immediate danger from those same corrupt elders, long before she had gathered enough evidence to protect herself." The words settled uncomfortably in Damian's chest. He had spent years building trust with his council, believing their loyalty absolute simply because they had never openly opposed him. He had never considered that loyalty on the surface might conceal betrayal underneath, patient and calculated, waiting for the right moment to strike. They reached Hollow Vale on the morning of the 4th day, the ruins emerging from the mist like the skeleton of a forgotten age. Stone structures, weathered and crumbling, stretched across a wide valley, remnants of buildings that had once housed a thriving settlement long before the current pack territories had been established. Grace moved cautiously through the ruins alongside Damian, her eyes scanning every shadowed corner for signs of danger or discovery. They found the entrance to an underground chamber hidden beneath what remained of a central hall, its stone steps descending into darkness that had clearly not been disturbed in generations, save for one clear set of recent footprints leading down into the depths. "She was here," Damian said quietly, recognizing the size and shape of the prints immediately. They descended together, torches lighting the way through narrow stone corridors carved with symbols Damian did not recognize, ancient markings that spoke of a history far older than anything taught in his own pack's traditions. The corridor eventually opened into a wide chamber, its walls covered floor to ceiling with carved records, names and dates stretching back countless generations. At the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal, and upon it rested a single golden circlet, simple in design but unmistakably ancient, clearly crafted for a purpose far greater than mere decoration. "This is a throne room," Grace whispered, her voice echoing softly against the stone walls. "Or what remains of one." Damian approached the pedestal slowly, his eyes moving across the carved names surrounding the chamber walls. Near the base of the pedestal, more recent markings caught his attention, fresh enough that dust had not yet settled into their grooves. He recognized Elena's handwriting once again, carved carefully into the stone itself. "I am the last of this bloodline. I did not choose this destiny, but I will not abandon it any longer." Damian stood frozen, staring at the words, the full weight of understanding finally settling over him. Elena was not simply an Omega who had risen through determination and skill. She was, according to this ancient chamber and everything Grace had uncovered in the archives, the last living heir of a bloodline deliberately erased from history by alphas who feared its power, a bloodline whose claim to leadership predated the entire structure of packs as Damian understood them. She did not run from us in weakness, Serafina said quietly, standing at the chamber entrance. She walked towards something she had spent her entire life not fully understanding, until circumstances finally forced her to embrace it. Damian turned to face the others, his expression a mixture of guilt, wonder, and rising urgency. We need to find her. Now more than ever, we need to understand what she intends to do with this knowledge, and whether the corruption within my own council played any role in forcing her hand. There is something else, Grace said, kneeling near the chamber wall where additional carvings had been recently added. Look here. Damian moved closer, reading the fresh inscription carefully. It described not simply Elena's bloodline, but a prophecy tied to it, an ancient promise that when the last heir of the erased lineage reclaimed her birthright, the true balance of power among all packs would shift permanently, ending an age of fractured alliances and beginning something entirely new. A new age, Damian murmured. Is that what she believes she is beginning? Perhaps it is what she is meant to begin, Serafina said, whether she fully believes it herself or not. They remained in the chamber for hours, documenting every carving, every symbol, every piece of history that might help them understand what Elena now knew about herself and what she intended to do with that knowledge. By the time they emerged back into daylight, the sun had begun its descent toward evening, casting long shadows across the ruined valley. As they prepared to make camp for the night before beginning their return journey, a warrior from Damian's own guard approached with urgent news carried swiftly from the pack territories. Alpha Damian, the warrior said, breathless from hard travel, there is unrest within the council. Several elders have been quietly meeting in secret, and rumors suggest they intend to challenge your leadership directly, claiming your judgment has been compromised by recent events. Damian's jaw tightened. Which elders? Edmund Vale remains loyal, the warrior said, but others, including several who supported the alliance with the Crimson Moon Pack most strongly, have grown emboldened by Elena's disappearance. They argue that a Luna who abandons her post without explanation proves the wisdom of seeking additional alliances beyond a single unreliable bloodline. Damian felt fresh anger rising within him, though this time it was not directed at Elena. It was directed at himself, for failing to see the corruption festering within his own council for so long, and at those same elders, for using Elena's departure as a weapon to further their own hidden agenda. We return immediately, Damian said. Whatever is happening within my council, I intend to address it directly, and I intend to discover the full truth about who has been manipulating this alliance from the very beginning. Serafina stepped forward. I will help you, if you will accept it. My father's ambitions may have played a role in pushing this alliance forward faster than wisdom suggested. I do not wish to see this pack, or Elena's legacy, destroyed by corruption that neither of us fully understood until now. Damian studied her carefully, recognizing in her expression something he had not expected to find, a genuine desire to see justice done, regardless of how it might affect her own position within the alliance. Thank you, he said quietly. It seems I have underestimated more than one woman in my life recently. As their party began the long journey back toward the pack territories, Damian found his thoughts returning again and again to Elena's carved words within that ancient chamber. She had not run from him in cowardice or heartbreak alone. She had walked toward a destiny larger than anything he had ever imagined for her, a destiny that would soon force him to confront not only the corruption within his own council, but the true nature of the woman he loved, and whether the throne he once believed was solely his to offer could ever truly belong to him alone again. The pack house had changed by the time Damian returned, the air within it was thick with tension that had nothing to do with his absence and everything to do with the whispers spreading through every corridor. Edmund Vale met him at the gates, his weathered face grim with worry. Alpha Damian, you must act quickly. 3 of the elders have called for an emergency council session tomorrow at dawn, and they intend to propose a vote of no confidence in your leadership. On what grounds? Damian demanded, though he suspected he already knew. They claim your judgment has been compromised, Edmund said. First by allowing your Luna's disappearance to go unexplained, and now by your sudden unexplained absence from the pack during a time of political sensitivity. They argue the alliance with Crimson Moon requires stronger leadership than you have recently demonstrated. Damian's jaw tightened. Which elders lead this challenge? Alpha Councillors Marcus Dane and Victoria Holt, Edmund said, along with support from several younger council members eager to see change. Damian recognized both names immediately, elders who had championed the alliance with the Crimson Moon Pack most enthusiastically from the very beginning, elders whose sudden challenge to his leadership now made perfect sense in light of everything he had learned at Hollowvale. Gather every piece of evidence Elena collected regarding council corruption, Damian said to Grace. If it exists within the pack house, find it tonight. We will need it by dawn. Grace nodded and disappeared quickly into the corridors, while Damian retreated to his study with Serafina and Edmund, spending the remaining hours of darkness piecing together financial records, border patrol reports, and testimony from warriors who had noticed irregularities they had previously been too afraid to report openly. By the time dawn approached, a clearer picture had emerged. Marcus Dane and Victoria Holt had indeed been secretly accepting resources from the Shadowfang territories for several months, resources meant to purchase their influence in pushing the Crimson Moon Alliance forward on terms that ultimately weakened Damian's own pack's defenses while strengthening secret agreements benefiting the Shadowfang leadership. The emergency council session began at first light, the great hall filled with elders, warriors, and curious pack members eager to witness what many believed would be the beginning of a significant shift in leadership. Damian entered with Serafina at his side, Grace and Edmund following close behind, carrying the evidence they had gathered through the long night. Marcus Dane rose first, his expression carefully composed into an appearance of reluctant concern. Alpha Damian, we do not challenge your leadership lightly. But recent events have raised serious questions about your judgment and your ability to guide this pack safely through dangerous times. Before you continue, Damian said calmly, I would like to present evidence relevant to this council's true stability, evidence that speaks directly to the judgment and loyalty of certain members present in this very hall. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Damian gestured for Grace to step forward with the documents they had gathered. He detailed, piece by piece, the financial irregularities linking Marcus Dane and Victoria Holt to secret dealings with the Shadowfang territories, the redirected border resources, the pattern of votes that consistently favored decisions weakening the pack's independent strength in favor of arrangements that benefited hidden agendas. Victoria Holt's face paled visibly as the evidence mounted, while Marcus Dane attempted denial after denial, each one growing weaker as additional testimony from warriors confirmed patterns of suspicious activity stretching back months. This alliance with Crimson Moon, Damian said finally, his voice carrying clearly across the silent hall, was never simply about securing peace. It was manipulated from the very beginning by council members seeking personal gain through secret arrangements with our enemies. My Luna discovered this truth months ago and spent that time gathering proof, at great personal risk, rather than accusing loyal servants of this pack without solid evidence. The hall erupted into outraged murmurs, warriors and elders alike turning accusing eyes toward Marcus Dane and Victoria Holt, whose carefully constructed challenge to Damian's leadership crumbled entirely beneath the weight of their own exposed corruption. Edmund Vale rose to address the council directly. It seems clear that this challenge to Alpha Damian's leadership was itself a product of the very corruption Elena worked tirelessly to expose. I move that both accused council members be immediately removed from their positions, pending full investigation. The vote passed swiftly and decisively, Marcus Dane and Victoria Holt stripped of their council positions amid a wave of anger and betrayal from the very pack they had sworn to serve loyally. As the chaos of the morning began to settle, a warrior burst into the hall with urgent news that silenced every remaining conversation instantly. Alpha Damian, the warrior said, breathless, riders approach from the southern border. A significant force, moving under a banner none of our trackers recognize. Damian moved quickly to the pack house walls, Serafina and Edmund close behind him, watching as a substantial column of warriors approached across the open fields surrounding the territory. At its head rode a figure Damian recognized instantly, despite the months that had passed since he had last seen her. Elena rode at the front of the approaching force, dressed not in the simple traveling clothes she had worn the night she disappeared, but in armor befitting a leader of significant standing, a golden circlet resting upon her brow, unmistakably the very crown discovered within the ruins of Hollowvale. Behind her rode warriors bearing a banner Damian had never seen before, an ancient symbol representing the lineage Elena had discovered buried within her own blood, wolves who had apparently answered her call once she revealed her true heritage and began gathering support from scattered communities still loyal to that forgotten bloodline. The column halted a respectful distance from the pack house gates, and Elena rode forward alone, her expression calm and composed as she faced the pack she had once called home. "Elena," Damian said, moving to meet her as she dismounted, relief and uncertainty warring within his voice. "You have returned?" "I have returned," she confirmed, not as the Luna who once stood quietly beside you, but as the leader of a bloodline that has waited generations to reclaim its rightful place among the packs of this land. Damian studied her carefully, recognizing immediately that the woman before him carried herself differently than the Luna he had known for 3 years. There was new authority in her posture, new confidence in her voice, the natural bearing of someone who had fully embraced a destiny she had once only glimpsed in fragmented dreams and half-remembered visions. "I discovered the corruption within my own council," Damian said. "Marcus Dane and Victoria Holt have been removed from their positions, and the truth about the manipulated alliance has been revealed to the entire pack." "I know," Elena said. "Word travels quickly among those who have been watching this pack closely these past months." "Elena," Damian continued, his voice softening, "I understand now that I failed you long before that announcement was ever made. I failed to see the threat surrounding you, the corruption festering within my own council, and the weight of a truth about yourself that you carried alone for so long." Elena regarded him steadily, neither cold nor warm, simply present in a way that demanded honesty from them both. "You offered to share a throne with a woman you barely knew, believing that throne was entirely yours to offer. But Damian, that throne was never fully yours alone to begin with. It belonged equally to every sacrifice I made beside you, every battle I fought, every truth I protected long before I understood my full place in this world." Serafina stepped forward cautiously, addressing Elena directly. "I want you to know that I never intended to steal anything from you. When you warned me of the corruption within this council, I understood immediately that you were protecting this pack, not simply protecting your own position." Elena studied Serafina for a long moment before offering a small, genuine smile. "I never doubted your intentions, Serafina. My warning to you was never about rivalry. It was about ensuring that whatever happened next, this pack would not fall into the hands of those seeking to exploit it for personal gain." Damian stepped closer to Elena, his voice quiet enough that only she could hear clearly. "What happens now, between us?" Elena considered the question carefully before answering. "Now, Damian, you face a choice you were never truly forced to confront before. You must decide whether you are prepared to stand beside a queen who commands power equal to your own, or whether you still believe leadership means one voice speaking while all others simply follow." "I choose you," Damian said immediately, without hesitation. "Not as a Luna who stands quietly at my side, but as an equal, whose voice matters as much as my own in every decision that shapes this pack's future." "Words come easily," Elena said, though something in her tone suggested she recognized the sincerity behind his declaration. "Actions will prove whether you truly understand what equality between us requires." Damian nodded solemnly. "Then let me begin proving it immediately. I propose, before this entire council and every warrior gathered here, that leadership of these combined territories be shared fully and equally between your bloodline and mine, with every decision requiring both our agreement, every alliance requiring both our approval, every future challenge met by both our combined strength." A murmur of surprise rippled through the gathered crowd, warriors and elders alike watching closely as Elena considered his proposal. "And the alliance with Crimson Moon?" she asked. "What becomes of that arrangement now?" Nathaniel Cross, who had arrived earlier that morning to observe the growing crisis within Damian's pack, stepped forward from the crowd. "Given the corruption revealed within your own council, I believe it is time to renegotiate the terms of any alliance between our packs, terms that reflect true partnership rather than manipulation disguised as necessity." Serafina moved to stand beside her father. "I would welcome an alliance built on honesty rather than forced marriage, Alpha Damian. Perhaps our packs can find common ground through mutual respect rather than sacrifice disguised as diplomacy." Damian looked between Elena, Serafina, and Nathaniel, recognizing an opportunity to rebuild everything that had nearly been destroyed through hasty decisions and hidden corruption. "Then let us begin again, all of us, with full honesty about what each of us brings to this alliance, and what each of us requires to protect our own people. The negotiations that followed stretched through the remainder of the day, elders and warriors from multiple territories working together to construct an alliance built on genuine partnership rather than forced sacrifice. By evening, a new agreement had taken shape, one that recognized Elena's reclaimed bloodline as an equal power alongside Damian's own leadership, while establishing respectful cooperation with the Crimson Moon Pact based on mutual benefit rather than one-sided demand. As the sun began to set over the Pact territories, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Elena stood once again at the window of what had once been her chamber, though now it felt different, transformed by everything she had learned and become during her months away. Damian joined her quietly, standing at a respectful distance until she turned to acknowledge his presence. "I never wanted to leave you the way I did," Elena said softly. "But I needed to discover who I truly was, away from the shadow of a throne I believed I only occupied through your generosity." "You occupied that throne through your own strength," Damian said. "I simply failed to recognize it fully until circumstances forced me to see clearly." Elena reached out and took his hand, though the gesture now carried a different weight than it once had, the touch of an equal rather than a subordinate seeking reassurance. "The pact we build from here forward will look different than the one we built before. Are you prepared for that difference?" "I am prepared for whatever future we build together," Damian said, "as long as that future is built honestly, with both our voices carrying equal weight in every decision." Outside, warriors from both Elena's newly gathered forces and Damian's original pack worked side by side, beginning the long process of integrating two communities into something stronger and more resilient than either had been alone. Serafina and Nathaniel prepared to return to their own territory, carrying with them the promise of a renegotiated alliance built on genuine respect rather than desperate necessity. As night fell fully over the Pact territories, Elena removed the golden circlet from her brow and set it carefully on the table beside her, a symbol of the destiny she had claimed, though not the sum total of who she had become. "I was never meant to simply share a throne," she said quietly, watching the last light fade from the sky. "I was born to build my own, standing equal beside whoever proves worthy of standing there with me." Damian moved to stand beside her, watching the same darkening sky, understanding finally the true measure of the woman he had once believed he fully knew, and recognizing that whatever challenges awaited them in the future, they would face them now as genuine equals, bound not by inherited title or political necessity, but by hard-earned respect and truth finally spoken openly between them. The Pact territories settled into quiet that night, unaware that the queen who had vanished without a word had returned not as someone seeking forgiveness, but as someone who had finally claimed the full measure of her own worth, ready to build a future neither corruption nor careless decisions could ever again threaten to destroy.